Good afternoon. I think we'll get going. I'm Pat Dutcher-Walls, and I'm the director of the Vancouver School of Theology Library, the H.R. Macmillan Library, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you here today on behalf of the staff to the H.R. Macmillan Library for this launch of the Church Missionary Society Archives, which is a new acquisition by the library. Let me welcome friends from the Native Ministries Summer School. Let me welcome friends from Vancouver School of Theology students and staff. Let me welcome friends from libraries and First Nations bands and organizations throughout British Columbia. And a special welcome to our speakers who have graciously agreed to help us launch this significant new resource for research into the history of contact between First Nations and the churches. And Ray Jones will give the response.
Ama Silksas, everybody. Ama Silksas. That's good afternoon in Gitxan. Well, first I'd like to really thank Jerry and the Musqueam people, and especially the Musqueam ancestors who lived on this land for a millennium. And we thank you people for allowing us to do the work that is here that we have to do. And we're very excited on the Christian Mission Society archives coming here. I imagine it'll be another year or so before we will learn some of the records and dialogue that was done all those years ago. By the way, was anybody around at that time? Thought I had to throw that in. But on behalf of the Vancouver School of Theology and our Native Ministry Consortium, which the summer school is the 27th year this year. Would you believe that? And it's still going strong. And one of the ways it keeps going strong is that we have an annual salmon barbecue, which you all are welcome to after the completion of this lovely ceremony. So God bless you all.
Thank you. So before our speakers, let me say just a few words about what it is that we're launching and celebrating today. The Church Missionary Society Archives are a series of archives. This is what they look like. There's 95 reels of microfilm. And the Church Missionary Society was an Anglican missionary society based in London, England. The Church Missionary Society was a worldwide society of Christian missionaries. And in particular, in Canada, they were active among Native communities in Northwest Canada and British Columbia in the years from 1820 to 1930. The Missionary Society also had activities in China and Japan and India, around the world, but we have bought the sections of their archives having to do with Northwest Canada and British Columbia. And the library did this on behalf of and in cooperation with the Indigenous Studies Center here at VST, the Native Ministries Consortium, and on behalf of our students and of Native and non-Native researchers across British Columbia, so that this important resource could be available to people who want to do research into the history of relationships between First Nations and the churches, as well as other kinds of research, people doing personal stories. It's completely possible that those of you who live in British Columbia, people who were, if you have Anglican ancestors at all, they may well have their names in these archives, because there are many, many local names. There's names of bands all in here because everything that went between the local missionaries, all the correspondence that went between the local missionaries and the society back in London, we now have on film for those years. So the archives basically contain all matters of correspondence and reports between the missionaries, the mission stations, which were kind of the central locations, and the correspondence committees, which were the local committee in charge of the missionaries, the local bishops, as well as the secretary and the society office in London itself. So these archives include letters from the secretary in London to missionaries in the field. They include, if you will, the annual reports of the missionaries describing the mission activities that were sent back then to London. And they include the individual papers and correspondence from all of the missionaries who were in the field. And these include their letters, their reports. In some cases, we have maps of the areas they were working in. So just think land claims. If you have a map from 1850, you help establish a claim. It may predate any other evidence that would be acceptable in a court. So it talks also about establishment of schools. Think residential. The early forerunners of the residential schools are chronicled in these archives. Building of new mission houses, requests for and arrival of new missionaries, census materials, sketch maps of native bands, vocabulary. There's a Cree vocabulary. So for people remembering and resurrecting First Nations languages, there's evidence in these archives to help do that. Detailed reports and journal entries on events at the missions. It is an ambiguous gift that we have. I'm completely aware of that. As a white person who tries to be an ally of First Nations, but the history here is a difficult history. And to celebrate it is probably the wrong word. But to launch and to recognize the potential for research and the potential for political action, the potential for awareness that resides in these archives is indeed something that we as a library felt was worth investing in as a gesture not only for our own students and our own researchers, but people throughout British Columbia and Northwest Canada. And so that is what we launch today, and we are so grateful that you have helped us do that. We have three speakers kind of about the archives themselves. Our first one is Millie, who's actually a staff person. She's a student staff here at Vancouver School of Theology. Yes, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. Mark's prayer, yeah. We gotta pray. I'm sorry, Millie. We gotta do
It's
prayer.
okay.
Right.
Everything will collapse.
I know, exactly. Right. I'm sorry.
No problem. I want to say just for a moment that from 1861 to 1869, CMS, the Church Missionary Society, was in Alaska as well. And so it's very likely that these documents include valuable information on the start of the church in Alaska, where I was bishop for 10 years. So I will start and end the prayer in the Gwich'in dialect, which was that was used most often by Robert MacDonald, the Ojibwe Church Missionary Society missionary who really established the work which is now one of the biggest parts of the Diocese of Alaska. Let us pray. V'tegwit anchu tekwadet, O God of unchangeable power and eternal light, look favorably on your whole church, that wonderful and sacred mystery. By the effectual working of your providence, carry out in tranquility the plan of salvation. Let the whole world see and know that things which were cast down are being raised up, and things which had grown old are being made new, and that all things are being brought to their perfection by him through whom all things were made. Hichwe Jesus Christ kekwadet. Amen.
I come to you today as a student of Vancouver School of Theology, having the privilege to come here, as one of my aunties commented earlier today, on the support of my ancestors, the people in my community, and all people who are, some of our ancestors are mentioned in this book. So I was asked and approached to speak to this and to look at a document that was somehow resonating with me. My name is Dea Ria Wa Teta of the Mohawk Nation. I'm Mohawk in Ojibwe. I belong to the Bear Clan, and I've been in British Columbia, a welcome visitor by the Coast Salish people in Musqueam for a period of 16 years. I'm a cultural practitioner here and privileged to know of what this school has to offer our people. I come to you having searched out a document that I went and had the privilege to look at, and I say that with the utmost humility because it isn't a privilege to look at the harsh words of heathen Indians, to read those words, to read the words of half-breeds and Indian nations. These are terms that were not a part of our worldview. I had to socially locate myself in this document. And I'm not a BC native, and I would be proud to be accepted in any territory that would welcome me. But honestly, I had to look at this document from my own ancestry. And so I went back as far east as I could go. And the archives brought me to a document, June 23rd, 1875. And it was about the Red River area and how the missionaries were coming out onto the land. It's one letter, and in it I saw how much stuff went on in one letter. I saw school, delegation, finance. I saw how the people were being perceived. Last year I had a privilege in my Canadian History Studies class to take up a book. And the book I chose was Big Bear, The End of Freedom. And it's from this lens and this identifying with Big Bear because Big Bear was an ancestor of the Ojibwe people. And I myself am Ojibwe, and it's only from this notion that I can speak to this document because otherwise I have no knowledge. I know that this document was a part of the Christian experience on this new territory, and I know that things have changed. It has been 30 years I can recollect in my small time here on this walk. It's been 30 years that I've watched transformation occur. There was a time when I was called names and made fun of because the color of my skin. And many people know of this story because we all share the pain. So today I have this privilege to education of Indigenous studies, theology, studying God and the Creator with the notion and the knowledge that we are all one. that we come here with an open heart and an open mind, with the knowledge of the ancestors who welcomed the first visitors on the eastern shores. And I never forget that, because the first treaties we had with the people were peace and friendship treaties. And that peace and friendship never changed for our people. We just never understood. Big Bear and his story about the end of freedom was done by a historian, educator, Indian educator from Alberta. And I was privileged to read this book because he was Ojibwe. And it taught me a little bit more about myself and the journey where I am going and where the Creator is taking me in my moccasins. So I'm grateful for this opportunity to share and to look at how times have changed. Half-breed would have not been in our worldview. If a child was born from a mother, my mother would say, "That's your brother or your sister. Doesn't matter." Heathen. I studied the word. I understood it to be another term for pagan. And again, through the history and learning about Christianity and the emergence on the land, I learned a lot about how this notion was created. And the worldviews are and were different. But in this house, in this holy place, the Creator has brought many, many faiths together. And under the banner of Vancouver School of Theology, we are allowed to practice and be who we are today as the Creator's beings, co-creating a new reality so that we don't have to walk in the historical pain as we have this material to move forward in court battles and in even family knowledge. So it's been a privilege and an honor to speak with you all and to represent my people, the Mohawk and Ojibwe people, and this school. My hands go up to you in a Coast Salish way, because my ancestors and my Mohawk people say, you can't do Mohawk stuff in somebody else's territory. You have to walk with the people where you are. So I'm in Coast Salish territory, so I Haichka, and my hands go up to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Millie. Our next speaker actually comes from UBC. He's the UBC reference librarian, and he's the one who will be in charge of the unit at the UBC library where the archives will actually be housed. And we're working out a memorandum of agreement with UBC because they've got the equipment and they've got the tools to make sure, and the reference support to make sure people will be able to get to the archives. So welcome, please, Daryl Bailey.
I brought a couple things. I am from the library, so it probably won't surprise you that I to bring a few things along with me. What can I say about this archive? Okay, obviously, when you come to UBC library proper, we would consider Vancouver School of Theology on the part of a UBC library. You certainly have access to all the resources at UBC Library. That means if you're a current student, staff or faculty, through either your CWL campus-wide login or your, I hate to say this one, but your 14-digit barcode and PIN, which nobody remembers. So if you have forgotten your PIN, believe me, I don't know my PIN. I use my CWL all the time. The only time there is a time you actually need your 14-digit barcode and PIN if you're making an interlibrary loan. And that's one thing. One reason why occasionally you need to go get your 14-digit barcode and PIN. What can I say about this collection itself? I'm not going to repeat a lot of things that Pat had said, so I'm going to basically describe what you guys will encounter when you have to go look at this material. You will, at some point in the near future, encounter a 95 reel collection on 35 millimeter film. Nice thing about this film is that it'll last for 300 years, whereas a book like this Census of Canada book, it's 1880. It's basically falling apart. So probably another 20, 30 years, that thing will be dust. So this will last a while, and should last a lifetime of most of us here, I think, by the looks of it. So this is what a 35 millimeter film looks like. So there is a finding aid to the material. The finding aid is online. This is what they would call a finding aid from a company called Adam Matthew. And Adam, this is who produced this microfilm collection, as well as other Church Missionary Society archives. It's much larger than the 95 reels. It's thousands of reels because it deals with East China, Africa. It deals with the West Indies. So, and as a member of UBC Library, you do have access to that materials. Do we have it in the library right now? No, but we are a member of a consortium called the Center of Research Libraries, and we can get that film if for some reason you want to do something on Fujian province in China. We can get you that film for an unlimited amount of time until basically the next person wants it. So 2 years is not unheard of. And we do have users who ask for other than the film that we have. So 95 reels in the collection that's going to be housed in UBC Library. We do have also related to those volume and related to this collection too. We do have a previous edition of exactly the same that you're finding. It was made by the Public Archives of Canada in the 50s. Very bad reproduction and a slightly different order of materials. So if I were recommending people to use that collection, but the wonderful thing about the Public Archives of Canada, they used to have an army of librarians and archivists. They made a 3-volume finding aid to the materials. So will it correspond exactly the order that you will find on the Adam Matthew archive? No, but at least you'll be able to know if the letter or the person or the place, there's material on it. And with a little effort, you can equate the two archives. Now, I was thinking of your comment about the Alaska. This would be a good source to look to see if that Alaska communities that were part of your mission are named in here, or some of the early people. So this could prove useful, and 3 volumes housed fairly close to the microform equipment. Should I dare? No. I was going to show you the pictures of what a microform reader printer scanner looks like. And if anybody's really interested, come see me after. I'll show you a picture. You can scan the document, put it into a PDF, and email it to yourself. You could sit there and read it, which we don't get many users who just read it these days. Or you could sit there and press a button and print. But I would suggest not press a button and print because it'll cost you 20 cents a copy. So you may as well scan it into a PDF and go print it somewhere where it's much cheaper than UBC.Earth. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. But if anybody wants to see a picture of the equipment, I do have a picture on my laptop. And you can find me Monday through Friday. I'm very user-friendly. I live close to campus, so I will come in on the weekends. The microform equipment is set up generally between 10 and 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. There's some weekend hours, I can't quite remember. They seem to change from year to year. That would be from September through April, and then a little bit reduced hours during the May through August period, with access, I believe, on Saturday, but we're closed Sunday, so it doesnn't matter. Unless you have a key to the place, then just go and use it.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you, thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Let me just point out in this PowerPoint that we created this by going there, putting the film in the archive and sending the PDF to ourselves here at the library. And then we were able to, this letter was a letter from the bishop in 1866. And we have it transcribed over here, and that was all because we PDF'd it to ourselves, and then we could print it and read it. So if you want to see what one of the documents is, we have the entire letter put out, and it's transcribed down at the bottom, so that we've worked with that. And then this chart was from it was called the Indian Tribes of the Pacific Coast, and it lists the tribes both with the traders' names and the tribe's name, and then it has a census of men, women, children, boys and girls, and male and female slaves held by the different bands. So that's a sample from there. So our final speaker then is Jean Joseph.
Howdy, my name is Jean Joseph, and it is a pleasure to me to be asked to speak here today. It is part of our tradition that we introduce ourselves to provide some family background so that you know something about me and my people. Are you able to hear me? No. Maybe it's...
That just goes.
Yeah, it just goes.
Oh, does it? Oh, okay. Okay, I have to project. Okay. I'll put this back over there. Okay. My mother, Louise Joseph, and her parents, Maxine and Agnes George, are from the Notley Reserve. They're Dakelth, commonly known as carrier people, and they're from the village of Notley, near north central British Columbia. My father, Walter Joseph, and his ancestors are Wet'suwet'en, which is near Smithers, British Columbia, in between Smithers, Hazelton, and the Burns Lake area. And we go further down south as well. The village that I'm from is Tsekia, which is a Wet'suwet'en name for our village. It is known by the Giksan name, which the Giksan people have named it Hagwilget, which is translates as people, the place of the quiet people. So maybe that's why I'm not projecting as well as I should. Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me to speak at this important new acquisition for the Vancouver School of Theology's library and the UBC library system. The microfilms of the Church Missionary Archives I'm a graduate of the School of UBC Library Archives and Sciences, and I have worked for the last 35 years as a librarian for First Nations organizations, bands, and tribal councils, primarily in the area of Aboriginal rights and title. Therefore, I am aware of the historical significance this collection has for First Nations people in British Columbia. As you know, the three church groups represented here in the Native Ministries at the Vancouver School of Theology have a long history with the First Nations in British Columbia. As a person directly involved in the Delagamuukw and Gistewa court case, I was very pleased in June of 1997 when I heard that the Anglican Church of Canada had thrown its support behind the Gitxsan and Wet'suwet'en people, the First Nations, who were pressing their land claims support in the Supreme Court of Canada. I also recalled that the Anglican Church did provide with support during the trial period of the case in the late 1980s. I believe it was part of the church's social justice program. The Presbyterian Church in Canada, in its Social Action Handbook, states that the First Nations of Canada should have a constitutional guarantee to the rights to self-government and to an adequate land and economic base arising from Aboriginal title, Aboriginal rights, and treaty rights. The United Church of Canada is committed to seeking right relationships with Aboriginal people and to support First Nations in their struggle for self-government and Aboriginal rights. With the three churches' commitment to support us in our struggle for Aboriginal title and rights, I think it is entirely appropriate that the Vancouver School of Theology has made this new acquisition of the Church Missionary Archives. Here in Canada, many people realize and accept that this beautiful land was already occupied and owned by Aboriginal people, the Salish, the Haida, the Haisla, the Dakelth, the Gitxsan, and the Wet'suwet'en, and all the other First Nations, before it was claimed by the British. However, the First Nations continue to have to prove it at the negotiations tables and in the courts. Today, it is necessary for First Nations to undertake a great deal of research to present and uphold our Aboriginal title and rights to our homelands. And even if a treaty is signed, we still must be prepared to fight for the treaty itself, as evidenced by the recent Nunavut court case regarding the Nunavut Treaty. 34 years ago, I worked at the Union of BC Indian Chiefs Library when the Union was just then purchasing the Black Series microfilms of Record Group 10 of the Department of Indian Affairs. Over the years, the Union has publicized and assisted and given access to all First Nations who needed to research those files. They have been an invaluable help to us in our work, especially in providing the necessary documentation supporting our legal cases in Aboriginal title rights and specific claims. So now, I am pleased that the Church Missionary Society archives are now available here at the Vancouver School of Theology and at UBC here. Of course, I know that the collection's primary purpose is to support the students' work at the Vancouver School of Theology, and I expect that the students will find it illuminating and increase their understanding of the Church's past activities and impact on the First Nations' history, language, and culture. This enlightenment will assist in their future ministries among not only First Nations people, but also with the general society who have very little knowledge or understanding of the original people's history and culture in this country. What I am personally interested in is how easing access to this information will assist First Nations in locating and identifying materials in this collection, and so support the legal necessity of proving ownership and occupation of this land. The missionaries were one of the first groups and who recorded their observations and activities among First Nations. Therefore, this archival resource is invaluable to our research. I expect that the documents within this collection will show First Nations use and occupancy of the lands and what type of information is required right now by the courts of law to uphold Aboriginal title. It would be wonderful if the Vancouver School of Theology advertised their new acquisition and invited access to this microfilm collection by the First Nations. One thing that I have noticed in my years of research work for Aboriginal title, one thing I hadn't mentioned is that I was the librarian and person in charge of the information that was gathered by the Gitxsan First Nation and the Wet'suwet'en First Nations for the Delgamuukw court case. And I started working, collecting and organizing material before we went into court, and I carried on through the appeals. And so I have a long history of working with legal documentation required by the courts. And anyways, in my years of working with the Black Series for Western Canada, for the Department of Indian Affairs, is that I realized that detailed document by document finding aids are invaluable in alleviating the needs of individual First Nations, having to review numerous materials that may not be relevant to their needs. Now, I can see archivists and librarians sort of gasping and horrified at the idea of document by document. But as a person who's had to look after and organize and retrieve material for court cases, that is how we have to retrieve the information for court cases, is by document. And so this is why I say it would be invaluable to have finding aids that will assist us in using all of these microfilms. While creation of detailed finding aids is probably beyond the current scope of activities for the Vancouver School of Theology and UBC, it may be something to consider addressing for the long-term use of this collection. These finding aids would preclude the usual needle in a haystack of traditional archival research, and it would save countless hours for under-resourced people and First Nations. In the meanwhile, I do congratulate you upon this important acquisition and wish you, the librarians and archivists, your students and the ministries and the patrons, to have many wonderful hours of illuminating research. Masi.
And thank you, Jean, very much. We do have hope here at the library to actually create some of the finding aids. We have arrangements with the Library and Archives School at UBC to take in interns, and we're going to give them projects creating finding aids. So we're hoping to do that. So we just now have a word of closing. And I do want to call our speakers up just to say a word of thank you. So Daryl, to you, thank you very much for helping us. Millie, where are you?
She's outside. She's
okay. All right.
migrated towards the barbecue.
Okay. All right. Millie. Jean Joseph, thank you very much. Jerry Sparrow, thank you very much. Ray Jones. And Mark McDonald, thank you very much for helping us today. And let me then just say thank you to all of you for coming. I hope this proves to be a wonderful source of papers for all of you students. And now you get to join us in the barbecue out on the lawn. Thank you very much for coming.